Yes.
Okay. So I'm a planning coordinator with the Department of Agriculture. I cover Northern West Virginia. With us tonight is Dane Gaiser. He is our Veteran and Warriors to Agricultural Program Coordinator. We also have some mentors on this slide, and we'll make sure we share this with you. If you're looking for a veteran to work with to maybe mentor you with your kitchen garden, these guys will be a really great help, and that's Dave Clough and Doug Koenig. So we're going to start off with a short video tour of our garden. Oh my goodness, I didn't introduce my husband. I'm so sorry. Used to doing this by myself. This is my husband, Chuck Gantzer. The gardens are all really his project. I work in gardening and I work with farmers, so I don't have a lot of time. We're going to start off with a short video, about 10 minutes. It's going to cover our gardens, our small high tunnel, and some of our raised beds. Then after the video, we'll take some questions, and then we'll move on to a quick PowerPoint. We're going to talk about making some decisions for your garden, season extension, and companion planting. So I'm going to go off video and start our YouTube video. Hi, my name is Kacey Gantzer, and this is my husband, Chuck. We live on a small homestead of about 2.5 acres. Today, we're going to show you our big garden, our small high tunnel, and a few of our raised beds and other creative ways we grow.
Here in our big garden, unfortunately we only get about 6 hours of sunlight a day, but we trade that for a creek that runs nearby, so I can use creek water to water everything in a 50-gallon reservoir barrel. And we also have great creek bottom soil, extremely fertile and very loamy, drains well, full of nutrients, and we'll show you around our garden here. Here we have Super Sweet 100 cherry tomatoes with marigolds and basil companion plants, alongside Ford Hook zucchini, 8 of those in this row, also with marigolds companion plants. This is the second planting of the cherry tomatoes. This is the first round of Super Sweet 100s. These went in the ground 15 days ago. They were seeded probably about 40 days ago. Also cherry tomatoes here, the Super Sweet 100s with more marigold. And these are our green beans, 3 different varieties planted on the same day, that you can see the different rates they grow: Jade, Strike, and Goldmine. And the Goldmine, obviously lacking of the 3. And these are our onions. They were the first thing that we planted here. They've actually been snowed on twice. The second that we planted, that we germinated indoors under lights, was our spinach here. We've been eating on every day for several weeks now, actually. Direct seeded is a New Zealand spinach that's a little more heat tolerant as we move into summer. They were directly seeded into the ground, whereas these were germinated indoors and then brought and planted in the ground. And behind me we have our lettuce bed that we've been eating from for a couple weeks now, actually. And we're next planting a winter squash in place. We'll be pulling the rest of the lettuce out and replace it with winter squash. And here we have our transplanted kohlrabi, purple Vienna kohlrabi, bright light Swiss chard, and our first direct seed of the season. We have 6 varieties of carrots that are doing pretty well. Here we have our Roma tomatoes, along with basil and marigolds, companion planted. Also, Brandywine pink in the next row over. We really want to do a lot of canning this season. It's more of a kitchen garden than a commercial garden. It's small enough to maintain, and be able to preserve and can any extra that we have for the season. Here we use DeWitt woven ground cover to keep the weeds at bay. Water can go through, and it acts as a mulch somewhat to keep the ground moist from drying out. It's amazing. It's a time saver. The time that you save pulling weeds, you can maintain the property otherwise.
Welcome to our small 12 by 20 foot high tunnel. Early this spring, we decided growing food needed to be a priority for our family. We have 2 daughters, Adeline, who just turned 4, and Amelia, who is 2. We like to teach them at home, so this has become somewhat of an outdoor classroom for us. We've been growing a lot of greens and eating them throughout the early spring, and now we're about to harvest our very first turnip.
Okay, so in our high tunnel, we started with a light till and introduced topsoil, peat moss, potting soil, a good loamy soil from the creek bed, and now we're about to pull our first turnip for the year. It's a purple top. So we had the frame for a couple years already, and this year when we constructed the high tunnel, we put wooden end walls and used wiggle wire to keep everything tight.
In our high tunnel, we're growing peppers, cucumbers, marigolds, multiple types of lettuce, and eggplant. We try to make sure we always have something new growing, so there's always something to eat from our kitchen garden. We are also able to start seedlings here in the high tunnel and have some storage. A question I get really often is, how do we take care of pests here on the homestead? Our garden, like any other, is filled with all kinds of enemies that want to eat our plants. One thing we use is OMRI rated, which means it's totally organic, is an insecticidal soap that comes in a concentrate, and you need a pretty good direct hit on the bugs to get rid of them. Our biggest enemy here are slugs. Living really close to a creek and in a shady area, we have major slug issues. We use Sluggo and a slug bait. These are both organic rated. They work pretty well for us, but we have to be really diligent about using them. And then in our high tunnel, we found that sticky traps work really, really well. The yellow attracts the bugs, they stick to it. We have one up here at the end of the high tunnel. It's been only up for about 2 hours and it's almost covered already with insects. We try to keep really close eye on it, always looking for eggs underneath the leaves. A lot of times that's where you're going to find what's lurking in your high tunnel. But we try to keep organic and do the best we can. We're not selling these products, so we expect a little bit of loss to insects. This is what we call the tea garden. It's an 88 square foot raised bed garden. It actually came before our high tunnel. This year in the early spring, we grew tulips in the front, and now we've converted to mostly herbs and tomatoes, oregano, basil, thyme, dill, and lavender. Over here we have onions, and our favorite part is our pea TP. We're growing 3 varieties of peas, and then when these are finished, we will switch to pole beans. So there's always something growing in our kitchen garden.
In my kitchen garden.
Your kitchen garden? What else is in there?
And 2 types of oregano.
2 types of oregano. What else?
Creeping thyme.
Creeping thyme.
Tomato. Marigold. And lavender. And I'm gonna harvest my pea from my TP. Yum, 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 yum.
Here's some pictures of the construction of our raised bed tea garden early on, about 2 years ago. We added leaves, mulch, topsoil. This is the big garden. You can see we have really great creek bottom soil, no clay and no rocks. This is where we currently have the ground cover down. Tea garden early on. And this begins the construction of our small high tunnel. We did a light till and then added peat moss, topsoil, creek soil, all kinds of good compost. We used an old high tunnel frame and then added plastic. We're considering a second layer next year. This year we went with just a single layer. There's our completed high tunnel right there in our yard. We started some seedlings in there this summer. Most of them we did in our basement under lights. And then it's our early planting of peas with our tulips. And our spring crop of spinach. And our early spring onions. This gives you a better idea of early season. This was our second planting of beans. We'll plant beans 3 times this season. And on June 1st, we planted our pumpkin seeds. Right. So hopefully everyone was able to see that well. Do we have any questions that I can take now? I tried to answer most of them I could from the chat box. I can't actually see the chat box when I'm on. So Dan, you want to let me, is there anyone who needs questions answered?
I'm not seeing any right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we're good to keep on trucking. Yeah, anybody, if you have questions, just go ahead and drop them there. We'll keep tabs on them.
So I know one question was asked about how we got all that creek soil. How many buckets do you think we added to the high tunnel?
Probably 20.
20. Yeah. So we've been really creative. We haven't spent a lot of money. We are growing for our family and for our kitchen. So we try to be as thrifty as possible. So when we're looking at planting kitchen gardens, it's a lot like a production farm, just on a lot smaller scale. So here in the middle, you can see this is the drawing that we use when planting our big garden. This way we can keep track of planting dates and what has been planted and how many plants. So if you're thinking about developing a garden for you and your family, or maybe even a larger one to start selling some products, some things you really want to consider are sun and shade. We unfortunately live really deep in a creek valley and we only get at max 6 hours of sunlight a day. So that means for us, some crops just don't work. Drainage can be a huge issue. And think about access. Are you going to need a vehicle into your garden? How are you going to get there? Another thing to think about is out of sight, out of mind. There's kind of an old proverb that said the reason that the French people did really, really good in culinary endeavors was because they kept their kitchen gardens very close to their homes. And in England, gardens moved further away from homes. And we all know that cuisine didn't develop very well. So the idea is if it's right there and you see it every day, you're going to be more likely to use what you're growing and maybe able to grow more. Think about your natural surrounding elements. We have some issues with flooding. So we had to think about that when we were planting. A lot of the stuff that is not edible, I like to keep closer to the creeks in previous years. And the number one thing any ag service person will tell you is get a soil test. They're either free or very inexpensive. We can hook you up with some soil tests, but that really lets you plan your garden because you know what you're going to need to do. And then again, choose what your family wants to eat, what you like, what you want to preserve, and what will be something that you'll enjoy in the garden. It's fun to try new things, but you can easily try way, way too many new things or plant hundreds of heads of lettuce and maybe not have a way to eat them all. So we probably would have planted less lettuce this year and more things we could preserve if we had thought a little bit more ahead of time. Another thing Chuck is doing is keeping track of the harvest. If you tell them, keeping track of why that's so important.
Well, for the next year's planting, just as we've found out
We're learning.
Little heavy on the lettuce this year. It helps you learn what grows in what part of the garden too.
That's best. Also lets us know our seedling dates. We know when we planted our seeds. Maybe we could back it up a little earlier or maybe push it a little bit later. We try to always be planting something. Like tomorrow, we got to get our pole beans in. Our peas are done. It's amazing. It's only been 2 weeks since those videos and the garden looks completely different. Yeah. And really, we take the winter time to start thinking about what worked for us, what we can do next year. And, can we go bigger? Do we maybe need to go smaller? It's all about what works for you in your garden. Okay. So another thing is our planting zones. You can see tonight we're here from all over West Virginia, and a lot of us are in different planting zones. So this is really important. This year we had 80-degree days in April, and I know the greenhouse right near us sold out in April, and everyone planted tomatoes, but in the middle of May, it got down to 24 degrees here. Luckily, everything in our high tunnel made it. We again did a little thrifty trick throughout that coldest night. Chuck took really big buckets of hot water and poured them in the center of our high tunnel in the soil to keep some ambient temperature. And it worked. At 23 degrees outside, we did not lose anything in that high tunnel.
Hey, Kacey, sorry to interrupt you there. I think that you're not sharing the presentation. You're still showing the video and screen there.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I don't know how the video is on there. I don't see it. All right. Okay. You with us? You good?
There we go. Yeah.
Okay. So again, that was the garden tracking. Just that basic information. You can see something as simple as that is a great way to track in your garden. A single piece of paper, draw it out. Having a visual of what you've done is really important. So again, we can look at our planting zones. We're up here in the northern panhandle. So some of you, luckily down south, get to plant a little bit earlier than us. This year we planted 1,600 square foot of garden beds. Just really want to emphasize to people, you don't need a ton of space. 1,600 square feet is a lot to have planted. It's ours to maintain every day. But then on the other hand, we do some small things like microgreen trays. I run 4 of them all the time, so we always have microgreens. Chuck did a creative way to plant his strawberries in a PVC tube.
Laying around and
thought, why not use it? We had a sunny spot.
Working really well.
We also do some hanging baskets in the high tunnel. Just really trying to be creative with our space. We're, again, in that deep valley and we don't have a lot of flat space. And then costs. I know one question was, how much would a high tunnel like that cost? Around $1,000. I mean, we got thrifty with it, but that's probably your basic price. That is a 12 by 20 high tunnel. We could have actually fit in some more bed space, but because our girls like to play in there, we left the middle pretty open. Think about fencing. Fencing is very expensive and may be one of your biggest investments for your garden. But if you invest all that time and all that work to grow all that food and it could be wiped out in a single night by some rabbits or a deer, a fence is really going to be worth it. We luckily have a moat situation, so it's really hard for animals to get in there. I would have a much higher fence if we lived somewhere else. Pest control can sometimes get expensive when you're looking at sprays. We grow organically. We expect some loss. We are not selling the products from our garden, so we don't do as heavy pest control as maybe someone who was selling would. Weed control, weeding takes forever. Now, sometimes it might not be as attractive to use that ground cover, but there's no way we could plant 1,600 square feet if we were hand weeding it every day. That ground cover, to give you an idea, is 4 feet wide by 300-foot long roll, and that rounds around $70. So for us, it pays for itself in time within a few weeks.
A couple of weeds.
I mean, hardly any weeding down there. Now on the high tunnel, because it's a smaller space and a lot of it's brought in topsoil, we don't have any ground cover down there. Someday we might consider that. Harvesting takes time, post-harvest cleanup. Just be always thinking about your time. Your time is extremely valuable, and so is the food that you're going to grow, but make sure that it works for you. And again, I'm going to slide it in one more time. You still need to get those soil test results to really help you guide your decisions in the garden. You'll notice that top picture there, drainage is a huge issue. A lot of us have heavy clay soils, not so ideal garden locations. So really take some time before you invest in a big garden to look at where you're going to plant. Is there seasonal flooding? Do you see a lot of animal tracks? And, you know, if this is a hot spot for animals, that might not be the spot to plant your garden. Allelopathic native plants, an example of that one would be black walnuts. You wouldn't want to plant anything in the Solanaceae family near black walnuts because they're allelopathic, which means they're going to hurt those plants. And that includes eggplants, tomatoes, peppers, anything in that family. The picture up on the top there, the dreaded deer. I've actually had more problem with groundhogs than deer in the past few years. So again, thinking about where your garden's going to be, you can plant a giant garden, but if you can't protect it, it might not be worth all that time and investment to go so large, because you can grow a lot of food in a small space. When I work with people on a small scale, I tell them to think about per square foot. So if I'm selling my products and I'm growing something, let's say like a cabbage, that takes up at least a 2 square foot space, I know as a grower, I can probably only sell that for a maximum of $3 to $4. It's going to sit in that space for 70 to 80 days. Does it make sense for me to grow that? If I'm selling, maybe not if I'm on limited space. But if my family loves sauerkraut and we love cabbage rolls and that's something we love and we want to know where it was grown and have access to it and be self-sufficient, maybe cabbage makes more sense. So it's really thinking about what you're going to do with it. Some of you may have large gardens and you're considering selling the products. Then you might want to think about how you're using that square footage more efficiently. We are really trying to get as many perennials as we can here on the homestead, perennial herbs, berries. Unfortunately, we have sun issues. Something to think about long term. A lot of times the perennial plants can be less maintenance. Sometimes they're actually pretty high maintenance. It just depends. But perennials may allow you to extend that season. So asparagus, rhubarb, those kind of things come nice and early. When you're living off of hundreds of heads of lettuce, that might be great to have a perennial coming in. And then looking at hybrids and heirlooms, a lot of people I work with like to save seeds. So you might want to choose an heirloom. The reason we like heirloom varieties is it's something we can't get at a grocery store. It doesn't travel very well and it doesn't store very well. So knowing that we can grow an heirloom tomato right here in our backyard, it makes it extremely valuable to us. So while that tomato may be only $2 to $3 on the market, it's worth $5 or $6 to me because I don't have access to those always. Knowing your goals. So if you're starting a garden or you want to expand yours, really think about what you want to do with it. Are you going to share with neighbors? We're really good about trading. A few weeks ago, we traded some lettuce for some canna lilies, which was really awesome. So maybe your neighbors are really good at growing peppers and you're great at corn and you could work out a trade deal. Maybe you're going to sell your extras. We're going to talk about West Virginia grown here in a few minutes. Be a great way to market your items, maybe at one of your local farmers markets. Is it for home consumption? Or maybe you want to preserve it so in the off season, you're still eating from the bounty of your garden. And next week, we're actually going to talk about canning and freezing. We like doing a lot of dehydrating. We have, more than 80 polycherry tomato plants in, which is a lot. It's a whole lot of them, but we're planning on drying them and preserving them. Consider saving your seeds. That is something to think about. It's kind of exciting to know the next year that you're growing something that you had planted the year before. We can give you some more guidance on that, selecting the best varieties for saving seeds and choosing the ideal fruit. And then again, keeping that harvest log. It may seem kind of annoying on a small garden scale to say, I got 15 heads of lettuce today and a quart of strawberries. But next year, you're going to forget those numbers. And if you've written them down as you go, it's a really great guide to see what worked, what didn't. And again, maybe I planted something too early, a little bit too late. Every year I say my peas have gone in too late. This year I feel pretty good about it. We're past our peak harvest. It's time to get those beans in there. And by keeping a harvest log, it's going to be a lot easier to decide when to succession plant. You know, like we said with the beans, in that first video, our beans weren't even out of the ground, our second planting. Now they're probably 6 inches tall. In about a week, we'll go ahead and plant beans again because we want to have them multiple times during the season. So our last planting probably won't be till mid-September in the high tunnel and mid to late August outdoors. So companion planting is something I like to talk about with people who are doing more backyard gardens or homesteading. Companion planting can be kind of difficult on a large production scale. This picture here is an example of a farm that I worked at, and I did companion planting on a very large scale. There's about 400 peppers there and about 300 tomato plants and a few hundred marigolds. There's also basil interplanted with that. What this can do is maximize your efficiency and help reduce that pesticide use. So not only are you having a cleaner product to eat, that you're spending less money on pesticides, and it's beautiful. You get flowers from the garden at the same time. That can help you bring in pollinators and control bad pests and bring habitats for beneficials. Also lets you maximize your space. We have marigolds interplanted throughout our gardens. You'll notice we don't have them with the beans or the cabbage because that is not a companion. That's not a good match. One thing you can also do is till your marigolds in at the end of the season, and that can also help repel harmful nematodes. Companion plants can do something as simple as provide trellising. The Three Sisters, everyone talks about that, you know, using beans, growing up corn and a squash. That's a natural trellis. It can also increase your soil coverage. Bare soil is the enemy. It causes the ground to dry out, you get more weed cover, and it's just more work for you. And it makes the garden really beautiful. There are lots of versions of companion planting. There's probably more information on the internet than you could handle. A few that I like to talk about are nasturtiums and cucumbers. Nasturtiums are extra fun because they're also an edible flower, which is wonderful. The most things we can get eating out of that garden, the better. Nasturtiums actually sold pretty well for me at farmers markets back in the day. They do really, really well growing them with cucumbers. Melons can be paired with flowering herbs. Sweet alyssum for your edible greens that'll attract hoverflies, which are going to eat some stuff for you. Calendula with your broccoli. The aphids are attracted to the sticky stems of the calendula. Calendula is another great one, especially for succession planting. They can handle a pretty decent frost. So let's say your marigolds are kind of dying out at the end of August. They're looking pretty rough. It's a great time to come back in with a calendula to replace that in the garden. Still a beneficial flower, and it will last deep into November. Basil or cilantro with your tomatoes. We love basil. I'm not a big cilantro fan, so we haven't put that out there. But lots and lots of basil, smells great, easy to pick at the same time. Roses and geraniums and chives for deterring beetles. And chamomile and cabbage to encourage those beneficial insects. This picture here lets you see some of those beneficial insects, especially in high tunnels, large production high tunnels. This is a great technique for keeping your plants healthy. I know that was a really quick overview of kind of what a kitchen garden is. Kind of the point I want to drive home is that a kitchen garden is made for you. It's what you make of it and what's going to work for your family. I have a feeling we're going to be eating a whole lot of tomatoes this year, and we're going to have some little pumpkins, and it's really great for us. It might take a lot of time to make that can of spaghetti sauce from our garden, but when we eat it, we have so much more respect for what went into it and all the hard work. And you can kind of reflect in the winter and think, wow, I did something pretty amazing with a really small space. So I'm going to pause here for if anyone has some questions. And then if not, we're going to talk a little bit about some of our programs.
Hey, Kacey, we actually got a handful of good questions there while
Okay.
you're talking.
I can't see them. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'll go ahead and read them off to you. So the first one was Eric. He asked, what is the best way to incorporate your kids into gardening?
Oh, That has been the biggest joy of this entire thing for us. Chuck has them out there every day while I'm working. They love to water. They've learned all of the plants. I mean, it's really exciting.
They're involved in every aspect.
Every
from
aspect.
planting seeds to watering it.
He's got crayons on the rocks down in the big garden. So we just make them part of it. We know there's going to be a little bit of loss to little rambunctious hands, but literally letting them watch it from the time the seed goes in the ground has been amazing.
And there was another one from Eric. I think Lisa answered him there in the chat box, but if you'd also want to, I guess, kind of expand on it while we're on video here so we can catch on the recording. He asked, what are microgreens and what can they be used for, coming from my kitchen garden? Okay,
microgreens that we focus on are broccoli, just straight seeded broccoli, peas, and a red wheat. Microgreens, wheat probably goes 10 to 12 days. So that is a young seedling. It's not a sprout because it has true leaves. It's not cotyledons. For microgreens, we put them in salads. Sometimes people say we're crazy because wheat is putting grass in a salad. Our girls love them in smoothies. I think the peas have a really nice mild taste. I like the taste of the broccoli. So it is a very, very young plant. And those ones we grow strictly in water. There is no soil. So the seeds go on top of that little plastic tray and there's holes in it. And then the roots go down inside and drink water. So every 10 to 14 days, we're harvesting a green year round. And we just put those near a window. They might be getting 4 or 5 hours sunlight and they still grow for us.
And then you ended up sort of answering this one, but Charlie had asked, how do you save your food, pressure can or freezing? You had mentioned you dehydrate.
We like dehydrating. Yeah, all of the above. Not so much pressure canning because something about that always scares me. And hopefully next week we'll learn all about how to do that safely. A lot of freezing. I'm big into freezing because it's really convenient to bring it back up. We're still eating last year's broccoli. And can a lot of salsa. We'll do a lot of spaghetti sauce. We're not big tomato juice drinkers. So again, it's really about preserving things you're going to eat, because we could can 100 jars of tomato juice, but we might not use it. If I do spaghetti sauce or salsa, we know we're going to use it.
Very cool. Let's see, and then we have another one here. So what is the best way to gravity feed your garden from an underground natural spring?
Ooh, I wish I knew. What's the ram pump? Is that what it's called?
The ram pump.
It has to be moving water. I don't know the spring answer because I sure wish we had a spring and we don't. But we'll find out someone who can answer that question. We'll have to get back to you. I've never had a working spring. And we have regular city water in our high tunnel and our other gardens.
And let's see, you had mentioned that you all collect water from the creek there. Do you use a pump for it?
So we were going to talk about that. Sure. No, we could. And we've been told many times we're crazy. We haven't bought a pump. Again, we're trying to save as much money as possible. So right now, Chuck is doing about 70 gallons of water a day carried bucket by hand. Luckily, we get really nice pressure because our water bill is up high enough, but by hand. But there are pumps for less than $300. You can get a trash pump, which is gas powered, and that's how we would get it up if he decides to stop carrying water.
Awesome. And I think going back to a question that was asked earlier about whether or not you all filter.
Yeah, no filtering for us. So if you were selling, we would absolutely want to look into filtering. We also, I'm pretty well versed in not watering the plants themselves. We're always the equivalent of drip tape. So that means it's going straight down to the soil. Our barrel is never filled, like more than an hour or two. So it's always getting emptied. So we don't have to worry about algae and so much as it's constant water going in there. Once a year, we get a water test of the creek just to make sure it's all right. But if I was selling lettuce, let's say, I would make sure I would never let that touch that lettuce, and I would never be watering on it, and I probably wouldn't be using creek water, honestly, if I was selling.
Awesome. I think that's it for now. The chat box.
Those were good questions, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah. Does anybody else have anything for Kacey there?
No? All right. We're going to talk about a few more things this evening. I wanted to talk about our West Virginia Grown program. This is a free branding program through the Department of Ag. Traditionally, we saw a lot of value-added products, so anything grown in West Virginia or more than 50% of the value of that product is done in West Virginia. So let's say a roasted coffee. The coffee being made obviously comes from not in West Virginia, but it's roasted, bagged, and marketed here. But people often forget that produce could be the core of West Virginia Grown. And I love seeing our farmers market gardeners join this program. You can use the labeling on your products. You could have a nice West Virginia Grown program or poster. So the email address is here, and we can get you that contact. Really simple application. So that's a really great program to consider if you're just starting to think about selling. And we'll have a directory of all of our members coming out this summer. So if anybody has questions on that, we can answer them. Speaking of questions, I am a planning coordinator for the Department of Ag. There are currently 4 of us. There's Lacey, Ashley, Nathan, and I. You'll notice our colors here on the map, that there's a bunch of blue in the center. Don't worry, we kind of share the center and we work with some of our other partners. So if your county is not highlighted in a color, don't worry, we can also take care of you. So if you're looking at what's legal to sell, how to sell something, how to market my business, how do I join a farmer's market, whatever you need, we can help you connect to the right people. One thing again about selling, if you are selling uncut produce, that means one cut in the field, you're not chopping up your zucchini, you're not making zucchini noodles, one cut in the field, that's considered uncut produce. That is not regulated. There are no permits. You can be a member of a farmer's market without paying for any vendor fees or anything or a vendor permit. So know that it is completely legal to sell the produce from your garden. So if you want to reach out to us, we're here to help anytime. And I'm going to go off video and I'm going to pass it back to Dane. And he's going to talk a little bit about our veterans program.
All right, thanks, Kacey. So yeah, I'm just going to give you a quick little blip here on the Veterans Warriors to Agriculture program. So we're here to support the integration of veterans and their family members who are interested in entering agriculture or supporting those who are already working in agriculture. And we do that in a lot of ways we work through partners, and we offer education, training, and scholarships, and we're expanding a lot of our mentorship opportunities. So we offer this to any veteran, if you're in the National Guard or Reserves, if you're a Gold Star family member, or if you're the family member of a deceased honorably discharged veteran, you're welcome to join too. So, if you fall in any of those criteria, please reach out to me. I'm glad to help. Our contact information's there. You can reach us at the office at 558-2210 or at vets2ag at WVDA.us. And then, yeah, that's pretty much it for Vets to Ag. We'll go ahead and move on to the next slide there, Kacey. All right, so a lot of you were, had some questions there about preservation. Next week, Lauren Weatherford from West Virginia Extension, she's going to be joining us and talking about canning, preservation, and freezing. So definitely jump on there. I think it'll definitely be a great class. Learn a lot. It'll go hand in hand with what you learned about this week in kitchen gardening. Learn how to take what you've grown in the garden and be able to preserve it and make use of what you've grown this season. And I guess kind of with that, I'll go again, ask.
Yeah, any other questions? We're still here. And if you want to ask questions instead of type in the chat box, since we're at the end here, feel free to unmute yourself.
I will read off Eric's response here. He had an idea for the spring. He said, I would put in a large container, like a 1-ton, 300-gallon tote, and gravity feed it to your garden through drip tape or use a garden hose.
Yeah, we hear that from Eric. We could absolutely do that. The drip tape's a little iffy on distance. You have to have some really good pressure to get too far on the line, but absolutely. And I want to thank everyone for coming on a Tuesday evening. I know that takes a lot. And please, if you know anyone interested, tell them this video will be available. You can watch it whenever you like. And we really appreciate everyone for coming out and joining us this evening.